The northern lands begin not with warmth, but with silence. It is the kind of silence that presses against your breath, heavy and crystalline, older than the wind that shapes it. Here, in this frozen nowhere, time walks slowly, dragging centuries through snow and stone. The boundaries between what is seen and what is imagined thin until the two become indistinguishable. It is not a gentle world, nor a forgiving one, but a vast cathedral of frost and echo, where the mountains themselves remember. When night descends over the Scandinavian wilderness, the sky burns with a pale green fire. The aurora moves like a living spirit, brushing light across the ice peaks and valleys, illuminating landscapes that appear carved by divine hands. Yet beneath that beauty sleeps something vast and breathing. Legends speak of forms buried in mountain roots, watching the fleeting dance of mortals while moonlight bleeds across frozen rivers. To travel here is to step across an ancient threshold, into a realm half dream and half warning. These lands once belonged not to man, but to giants. Long before stories were written, before kings carved their names into the bark of history, something else ruled the cold. The people of those regions whispered about them in the dark, careful never to speak aloud their names near the mountain walls. They called them trolls, beings of flesh and stone, as ancient as the glaciers and as unforgiving as winter itself. Every forest shadow, every ridge of rock might hide one of their heavy sleeping forms. They were not creatures of subtlety or human cunning, for their minds were simple as their muscles were mighty. In them, itself had taken form, unpolished, raw, eternal. Trolls could crush oaken gates with a single blow, yet stood bewildered by the stars. Their faces were grotesque sculptures of hatred and hunger. Wide nostrils flaring like caves, eyes dull as wet stones, mouths that split too wide, with teeth yellow as old bone. Some sagas tell of trolls with multiple heads or serpentine tails, their forms blurring the line between beast and mountain. To the people who survived those early ages, the world was not divided between man and monster, but between the known and the unknowable. The trolls belonged to the latter, vast entities that stalked the borders of reason. They were neither good nor evil. They were elemental, the physical echo of chaos clashing against fragile human order. To name them was an act of courage, but also an invitation to peril, as though speaking the word itself might wake them from their slumber beneath the stones. As you travel through the northern forests, each tree seems older than memory. The wind slithers through pine needles like the whisper of something large. You might glimpse shapes in the mist, or hear boulders shift without cause on distant slopes. Every sound carries weight, an echo of footsteps too heavy to belong to any animal. The air tastes of age and fear, and sometimes of the faintest breath of sulfur, as if the earth itself sighs beneath forgotten bodies. The ancients believed that by night the hills walked. They told tales of entire ridges rising from the earth, lumbering through the dark toward distant villages. In their wake, fires were found, extinguished, and cattle vanished, leaving only enormous prints baked into the frost. Those who survived such nights spoke of low growls that shook the roofs and a stench of damp moss and rot drifting in from the fields. Yet when dawn came, there was nothing, only stones, tall and silent, standing where the tracks ended. These beings were bound by one terrible law: daylight. For as soon as the first ray of sun touched their skin, the trolls turned to stone. It was said not to be death, but transformation, their bodies hardening into the very rock they sprang from. Mountain ridges, Solitary pillars and jagged cliffs were considered their remnants, monuments to an age when shadow ruled. Thus, the landscape of Scandinavia itself bears their memory. Each peak a frozen titan petrified beneath the first morning light. To the ancient Norse, the world was born from violence. In their oldest myths, the body of the first giant was torn apart to create the earth, sky, and sea. The trolls were echoes of that first act, living fragments of creation's brutality. Their flesh was cold and rough, their blood sluggish as tar, their hearts pulsing with the rhythm of thunder trapped within stone. They were the wilderness made flesh, the unyielding reminder that the earth itself could rise against humankind if provoked. If you stood beside a troll in those forgotten days, you might reach no higher than its knee. The sagas describe their height stretching from 3 to 10 meters, monstrous silhouettes capable of flinging boulders across valleys. Their strength was legendary, but so was their slowness. They thought in the pace of glaciers, and their rage moved like an avalanche, inevitable, unstoppable, and blind. To encounter one was to face Ra without mercy or reason. The northern villagers lived with that fear like one might live with winter. Inevitable, cyclical, demanding respect. Every fire they lit, every prayer they uttered, balanced between warding off the night and awakening it. They carved charms from iron and wore crosses to repel the unseen, mixing old pagan rites with Christian ones as insurance. Bells hung from the churches rang not only to call the faithful, but also to strike pain into the hearts of lurking trolls, forcing them back into shadowed dens. Faith changed the North slowly, melting through pagan ice across generations. Yet even as Christianity spread its discipline and light, it could not erase the shadows that clung to the mountains. The people still avoided traveling alone at dusk, still left offerings at strange stones, and still whispered apologies when the fog thickened over the moors. The troll, though exiled from theology, remained very much alive in the imagination, an ember glowing in the cold ashes of belief. To understand the mythology of the troll is to understand fear as a survival tool. These stories were not born from fantasy, but from necessity. They taught caution in dangerous landscapes, respect towards unpredictability, and humility before forces beyond comprehension. The troll was the teacher hidden within terror, the embodiment of what happens when boundaries are ignored or arrogance challenges the deep wild. But the stories held more than warning. There was awe inside them, a strange reverence for the vastness these beings represented. To the storyteller, the troll was not simply a monster, but a monument to endurance. Even turned to stone, they outlasted every kingdom, every faith, every fleeting century of humankind. The petrified giants became part of the land's poetry, eternal witnesses to the fragile lives moving beneath their silent watch. When travelers crossed fjords or valleys and saw rocks shaped like twisted faces, they did not see geological coincidence. They saw curses fulfilled and myths immortalized. The troll that once raged against dawn now stood forever frozen, its defiance becoming landscape, its scream transformed into mountain wind. Those who looked closely might still imagine motion beneath the stone, a subtle pulse waiting for the sun to set once more. And perhaps that was the greatest fear, that beneath centuries of ice and soil, the trolls were merely sleeping. Each twilight, when light fades into blue and the air grows colder, the world feels thinner, as if something ancient stirs beneath the ridges. The mountains breathe, the ground trembles, and you sense, not see, a colossal awareness turning in the dark. It is not imagination. It is memory. shared among stones and carried by the wind. For the northern world is a place of thresholds, where gods and beasts, faith and folklore coexist like intertwined branches under snow. The troll is not gone. It has merely shifted shape, retreating deeper into story, deeper into metaphor. In this way, myth survives extinction by hiding in the imagination of those who still listen. Every legend retold is a resurrection. Every fear acknowledged a form of worship toward the untamed earth. So the frozen veil of the north remains lifted only briefly. Beyond it lies that ancient dominion of giants, their presence lingering in crevices, forests, and the long, echoing hollows of mountains. To step into this space is to risk remembering how small humanity truly is. The troll, in its monstrous stillness, stands as a monument to that truth, our reminder that the wild does not forget. That is why, as the northern night gathers around you, there is always a reason to look twice at the shapes carved in moonlight. What you believe to be a mountain may once have been a face. What you think is safety may simply be the pause before awakening. The land keeps its secrets under layers of frost and stone, whispering through the aurora with a voice that only those who listen carefully will ever hear. Stay through this journey, for this is only the beginning of the truth buried in legends of the north. There are stories waiting among the shadows and names carved in ancient rock. Watch closely, listen deeply, and let the veil reveal what once was feared, worshipped, and never truly gone. To speak of the troll is to speak of something older than form, older than the language used to describe it. It is the sound of grinding rock and storm wind made flesh, a remnant of creation's unfinished roar. When the Norse sagas begin to give these beings shape, the language becomes crude and uncertain, as if the storytellers themselves struggled to define what haunted their mountains. The trolls were not merely monsters. They were the anatomy of the wilderness itself. Bones built from granite and sinews bound with frost. Their existence blurred the threshold between life and landscape. The ancient tales describe their proportions in awestruck tones. Some were scarcely taller than a cottage, while others towered into the clouds like living cliffs. Their skin was a gray-green hue, mottled with lichen and streaked with veins of quartz, bearing the same texture as the boulders scattered across the tundra. When they moved, entire hills seemed to shift with them. When they lay still, one could mistake them for a ridge sleeping under snow. To call them gigantic was almost understatement. They were geological forces given pulse and hunger. Their faces were monuments to grotesque craftsmanship. Noses drooped like stalactites over mouths split too wide for words, and eyes glimmered faintly in the dark, reflecting torchlight like pools of tar. Their lips were cracked with the cold of ages, and in some stories, their hair hung in clumps of moss or frozen mud. It was said that rainwater trickled from their beards, and that the scent of wet stone and decaying earth followed wherever they walked. To look upon one was to see man's reflection shattered into something wild and unrecognizable. In the earliest sagas, not all trolls possessed the same shape. Some had two heads that argued in low, grinding voices. Others bore thick tails that swept forests aside like twigs. A few were described with tusks curling upward from their jaws, their origins rooted in the primal chaos of the world's dawn. Where frost giants embodied cosmic power and divine opposition, trolls represented the mundane terror of the earth, the thing lurking a few miles beyond the last firelight. They were local, intimate, and horrifyingly real. Their limbs were colossal, and each finger ended in nails like stone chisels. When a troll gripped a tree, bark withered under its touch. Their breath fogged the air, heavy with the rot of damp caves. They moved slowly, but with unstoppable weight, like avalanches learning to walk. The ground complained beneath their steps, and their shadows could stretch across valleys long before their bodies emerged from darkness. To meet one was to witness the earth itself take offense at human intrusion. Yet trolls were not blind strength alone. There was a peculiar stupidity in there, a sluggishness of thought that left space for trickery. They could be deceived by mirrors, outwitted by riddles, or distracted by simple curiosity. In one tale, a clever shepherd lured a troll to its doom by claiming another troll owned a larger mountain. Enraged by envy, the creature searched all night for its rival and turned to stone at dawn. Intelligence to them was an alien concept, as unnecessary as sunlight. Their voices carried the echo of caves collapsing. When they spoke, mountains seemed to answer, and birds took flight in frightened flocks. They did not use language as humans did, but growls, bellows, and thunderous mumbles filled with meaning, known only to those of their kind. Hearing such a sound across the fjord was enough to drive strong men home, convinced the sky itself would split apart. And sometimes, in the thick fog, a voice would call back, another troll replying across the emptiness of the world. The physical awe of these beings extended to their cruelty. They hunted not merely out of hunger, but out of irritation, as though offended by human existence. Many stories whisper of farmers whose sheep vanished during moonlight nights, or of travelers who failed to return after venturing too close to cliffs that looked strangely human. Some trolls hurled stones the size of cottages at villages, shattering walls and scattering livestock as expressions of their boredom. Others stole maidens, believing them to shine too brightly, and dragged them into caverns where no light survived. To the Norse people, this brutality held purpose. It was the embodiment of natural threat, a reminder that man's dominion was fragile and temporary. The troll did what storms and landslides did, only with frightening intention. Their actions were not moral or malicious, simply instinctual, as if the laws of erosion and hunger had merged into flesh. Through these stories, fear taught humility, carving respect into communities that built their lives beside the raw wilderness. The transformation from flesh to stone at sunrise served as both punishment and mercy. Within the troll's body, stone slept beneath the skin, waiting to reclaim what was borrowed. As the sun's first rays crept across the horizon, the creatures stiffened, their sinews hardening until only silence remained. Villagers pointed to the new shapes rising from the ground. Twisted pillars, gnarled hands, or grotesque faces frozen in eternal surprise. What had once walked and howled was now part of the enduring earth, an immortal warning to those who watched. Even petrified, the trolls' forms were not truly dead. Many believed they could hear faint rumbling from the mountains during storms, the sound of their imprisoned hearts beating against the stone shell. Earthquakes were said to be the trolls' attempts to roll over in their sleep. When lightning illuminated peaks shaped like hunched figures, people crossed themselves, for they feared the thunder might shatter the spell of light and awaken them once again. The line between myth and geology remained perilously thin. Each attribute of the troll carried symbolic resonance. Their immense size mirrored the scale of human fear in a world without certainty. Their grotesque features represented deformity made divine, the face of chaos itself. Even their weakness to the sun reflected the fragile balance between shadow and revelation, an allegory for ignorance turning to knowledge, or barbarism, yielding to order. In every way, their bodies told moral stories without speech, each limb a continuation of belief carved into the landscape. Many folklorists later saw in these creatures echoes of displaced ancient gods. Their mixed forms and elemental ties might have been the last remnants of pre-Christian deities stripped of worship and dignity. The villagers, unable or unwilling to abandon them entirely, turned them into monsters instead. In this light, the troll's coarse visage hides tragedy. Once revered, now reviled. They became the wilderness's lost children, punished for existing beyond the new faith's understanding. Every crack in their stone skin was a scar of exile. The trolls' manner of living was as rough as their flesh. They dwelled in caves so deep that the sound of dripping water became their heartbeat. Some sources say they built crude furniture from bones and roots, while others insist they lived amid piles of stolen human tools and livestock skulls. Fire was an alien thing to them, an uncontrollable mimicry of the sun. So they preferred darkness lit only by the dull shimmer of phosphorescent moss. In that gloom, they were masters, sovereigns of timeless night. It was this aversion to light that defined their existence. Their hardened skin, though resistant to blades and arrows, could not endure the purity of day. One glimpse of dawn could unravel centuries of motion, transforming them from predators into monuments. Thus, they lived by moon and star, emerging only when darkness ruled. The sun was not merely an enemy. It was the boundary of their reality, the dividing force ensuring the balance between seen and unseen remained intact. In some tales, trolls attempted to defy this immutable law. They built vast stone roofs over valleys, or crafted cloaks of enchanted fur to hide from the sky's glare. But inevitably, some gap, some reflection, or some careless step ended their brief rebellion. Their defeat was eternal and poetic. The greater their power, the more complete their vulnerability. In them, arrogance met the inevitability of slight, and the world itself absorbed them back into silence. To imagine these beings is to understand why the early Norse viewed the landscape as alive. Every cliff, every lonely boulder bore the possibility of transformation. Even now, if one travels across Norway's western fjords or Sweden's rocky hills, the outlines of faces seem to sleep within the slopes. Moss grows like ancient beards, cracks resemble half-closed eyes, and lichens trace the memory of scars. Where's the memory of the trolls not as warning alone, but as confession, the land admitting its own stories? As time passes and faiths change, the image of the troll shifts, but never disappears. In the hearts of those who walk the cold plains, the idea still persists, that the earth is conscious, that it remembers disobedience, and that somewhere within its depths, slow hearts beat in stone cages. To look upon a great mountain is to meet a gaze older than humanity, one that once blinked and watched and perhaps envied those who move so easily under the forbidden sun. The trolls of the sagas still stand, though centuries have covered them in legend and moss. Their monolithic bodies remind us that the difference between myth and mountain is only a matter of light. At dusk, when shadows stretch across the fjords and the last sunlight hides behind peaks, the shapes seem to tremble ever so slightly. It is then that one must remember the oldest rule. What the day freezes, the night may yet awaken. The monoliths of flesh and stone are never fully gone. They are only waiting for darkness to return. There are places in the north where daylight lingers only a few hours. and even then it feels reluctant, pale, and untrustworthy. The winter sun hangs low, casting its frail light across mountains that swallow it whole before noon. In that drawn-out twilight, the world becomes something else. A realm not quite of man, not yet entirely of shadow. It is within this shifting veil that the trolls awaken, their ancient breaths rising from the caverns like mist on ice. The trolls are children of deep, inland places where warmth never reaches. They dwell beneath mountains, in hollows carved by their own colossal hands, or within damp labyrinths that echo with drops of unseen water. The forest above them murmurs with life, unaware of the monstrous silence pulsing below. For these hidden realms are not mere shelters, but extensions of their colossal bodies, veins of rock through which their slow hearts beat. The earth, in their company, feels alive and uneasy. At nightfall, movement returns to the hills. Stones grind against one another with the sound of distant thunder, and boulders roll as if guided by unseen wills. Out from their subterranean tombs, the trolls crawl, vast silhouettes merging with the tree line. They are not suited for dawn, and thus they claim dominion over the hours when the world forgets its shape. The stars bear witness to their walks, and the moon gleams upon their backs like a warning rather than a blessing. Those who live near the edges of forests whisper that they hear the trolls long before they see them. A rustle where no wind blows, a vibration traveling through the soil, or the sudden silence of nocturnal creatures vanishing midway through song. Sometimes it begins with a smell of wet granite, moss, and something old enough to predate decay itself. That scent alone is enough to send shepherds running from their night watches, abandoning even their flocks to save their own names from being spoken by something that should not speak. Their habitats are ancient wounds upon the land. Inside the caves, stalactites twist downward like teeth, and stalagmites grow upward like waiting hands. The walls glimmer faintly with crystals catching the dim torchlight of intruders foolish enough to enter. There are bones there too, arranged without pattern, relics of cattle, deer, and sometimes men. Yet to the trolls, such caverns are not grotesque. They are wombs of the earth, sacred halls that hum with the memory of the world's beginning. Daylight to these creatures is pain made visible. When its first pale threads touch the horizon, trolls retreat deep into their caverns, covering their faces with hands rough as cairns. The light burns not through fire, but through truth, revealing what should remain hidden. To them, the sun is betrayal, forcing the wild into stillness. If any among them lingers when dawn rises, legend says the transformation to stone is swift, complete, and agonizing. The screams of such a troll echo through the valley and then cease, replaced by the indifferent whistle of the morning wind. There are stories of travelers who stumbled upon strange figures at sunrise. Great forms sprawled among the rocks, caught mid-motion, arms outstretched, eyes hollow, jaws frozen wide as if in endless rage or plea. Some looked like they had been clawing toward the shadows when the sun struck, half their bodies buried, half fossilized in the air. The people gave these figures names and feared them as omens, building shrines or crossing themselves in hurried reverence each time they passed. For the trolls were reminders that power, unguarded, eventually devours itself. It is easy to imagine them asleep beneath the fjords, surrounded by an eternal dark as thick as stone. Their bodies merge gradually with the rock, their every breath shaking loose dust from the cave ceilings. In the absolute silence of those depths, even time hesitates to move. The air is cold enough to preserve the memory of past winters, and sometimes, when the wind travels the right way, a low murmur escapes from the cracks. It is said to be the trolls talking in their dreams, slow, rumbling voices echoing from one mountain to another across the frozen years. Each environment seems shaped for a particular tribe of trolls. Those of the mountains are the largest, built like cliffs with spines jagged as peaks. They are rulers of altitude, feeding on goats, lost hunters, and the brittle remains of avalanches. The forest trolls, smaller yet no less fearsome, blend within pine trunks and boulders, sometimes mistaken for rotting stumps until they move. They stalk the wooded valleys, emerging from the mist to steal livestock or chase away the woodcutters who venture too deep. Where humanity carved space, the trolls recoiled. But in the dark heart of wild land, they still reign. Their endurance depends entirely on secrecy. Light is death. Noise invites intrusion. Curiosity is suicide. Thus, their existence thrives only in ignorance. The troll survives because man forgets. Whenever a new age brings torches, priests, or explorers, the borders of their world shrink, and the darkness retreats deeper underground. Yet there, beneath the footprints of civilization, they persist, heavy with patience, waiting for neglect to open the gate once more. Eternity favors those who can wait in silence. The Norse once believed that entire mountain chains slept, holding trolls as fossils of divine disobedience. The creatures embodied the wildness that no god could ever tame, the remainder of a world born from violence and dust. They were leftovers of creation, sparks that refused to fade when order was declared. In this cosmic view, their hiding was not cowardice but punishment, the decree that chaos must lurk behind horizons and below ground forever. The trolls were banished by light itself, yet darkness endlessly invited them home. Some scholars of old folklore speak of the trolls' connection to places of unusual geology. Sulfur springs, caves that exhaled warm breath during winter, or stones that produced eerie cries in the wind were explained as signs of their presence. Villagers built boundaries around such places, sometimes marking them with iron crosses or small piles of rocks known as guardians. The act was both defense and acknowledgement, a pact between humans and the monsters of shadow. Respect the border, and the dead of daylight would stay buried. Inside the myth lies a deeper reflection. The trolls are metaphors for what hides within ourselves. Their caves are the subconscious of a people who lived half their lives in darkness, fearing the glacier's hunger and the night's endless return. What they buried in folk tales were the same instincts that once drove them to violence or superstition. Uncharted parts of the mind turned monstrous through isolation. Thus, every mountain held a reminder that ignorance too, when awakened, can devour reason whole. Even now, wanderers in these lands describe uncanny stillness after sunset. The forests seem to listen. The rivers flow more quietly, and somewhere beyond the reach of light, a slow weight stirs. The feeling is not malevolent, but immense, like knowing that something older and stronger observes your fragile passage. One can choose not to believe, and yet disbelief offers no comfort. Faith and denial are equally powerless against the unease of those haunted landscapes. Something waits there, patient as frost, steady as grief. Among the fjords of Norway stands a formation of stone that locals call the Frozen Council. 7 pillars rise side by side from the valley floor, their outlines unmistakably humanoid. Word tells that they were once trolls plotting the downfall of a nearby village, interrupted by dawn before their plan could unfold. Now they lean forever toward the east, staring at the sun that defeated them To this day, travelers passing through that place leave offerings of bread or salt near the pillars, a quiet acknowledgement of the boundary between punishment and persistence. To describe where the trolls hide is to describe where humanity refuses to look. They dwell in forgotten corridors of the world, the unused cave, the unlit corner of a forest, the stretch of coast where mist never clears. In these absences, they thrive. The human eye, trained on comfort and logic, erases them from memory each time dawn arrives. But memory is not destruction, it is sleep, and each sunset renews the covenant of shadow. When you walk alone at night along the northern ridges, try to listen beneath the wind. The cracking of ice may not belong only to the river. The shifting of stone might be breathing. Every echo that answers your step could be the delayed response of a creature whose concept of time makes centuries seem like seconds. The idea alone is enough to remind anyone that the night here is not empty. It is crowded with the waiting faces of forgotten titans concealed in darkness. The world humans inhabit is brief and temporary, but the troll's existence measures in ages. They have outlasted gods, kings, and even the languages that once gave them names. Each sunrise that sealed them into immobility is but another heartbeat in their slow chronicle of return. Their habitats are testament to endurance, persistence, and the terrifying beauty of what remains hidden. To walk through their territory is to move through time itself, frozen in vigilance. So when the moon is high and the forest still, remember that shadows fall longest where the earth remembers pain. Those are the places where the trolls survive, the eternal residents of night's hidden realms. They are not ghosts, not illusions, but memories sculpted into shape, waiting patiently for the light to fade. And when it does, when the last flame of civilization retreats into the horizon, they will stretch, awaken, and reclaim what was once truly theirs. When the great silence of winter settled across the valleys, the people of the north feared not only the snow, but what walked upon it. Hunger was the first herald of the trolls, a shadow stretching farther than any mountain. Livestock vanished overnight, doors splintered under strength no human could wield, and fields were found scarred with colossal footprints half filled with ice. Those who followed the tracks never returned. Their names later whispered as warnings to the reckless. The night was not empty. It listened, and it devoured. The troll's appetite was not governed by need alone, but by the ancient compulsion to destroy whatever reminded them of humankind. Their hatred for civilization was primal, born of displacement and fear of light. In their eyes, a farm was an intrusion into their wilderness, a defiance against the natural order that once belonged solely to them. Their fury was the fury of the mountain crushed under human boots, a vengeance taken not by mind, but by instinct. Nothing provoked them more than the glow of a distant village fire. Legends tell of trolls descending from fog-shrouded peaks under the cloak of storm, their arrival marked by the trembling of roofs and the wail of frightened cattle. They would tear down barns in minutes, devour animals whole, and sometimes carry away the shepherd who tried to protect them. In the chaos, only one rule bound them to mortality: the first ray of dawn. Villagers who survived the night often awoke to find their tormentors reduced to grotesque silhouettes of stone in the meadows, frozen mid-rage or mid-bite. In that transformation, hunger met justice, and terror met awe. Yet not all victims of trolls were random. Some were chosen. Many tales speak of travelers straying off the path and into mountain passes where eerie singing echoed through the fog. Those voices were said to belong to female trolls called trollkjering, whose beauty and shadow lured men toward invisible cliffs. Whether they sought companionship or vengeance remained uncertain. For those who followed never returned whole, if they returned at all. When discovered, their eyes were hollow with exhaustion, claiming they had danced with giants beneath a sky of stone. In the forests, the troll's fury manifested through chaos rather than pursuit. Fires kindled in the night spontaneously died just as heavy breathing approached from unseen directions. Hunters found their traps shattered and blood smears fading into the moss without any carcass left behind. Trees were uprooted as though struck by invisible forces, and strange patterns of boulders would appear overnight, signs interpreted as territorial warnings. To live near their domain was to endure an unending test of courage and faith. One tale from the old oral traditions recounts how a farmer, desperate after a poor harvest, stole firewood from a grove said to belong to trolls. That night, the mountain itself seemed to moan, and before dawn, his home was crushed by stones flung from afar. Only the barn's iron hinges survived, twisted but intact, protected by the metal the creatures loathed. It was said they wailed when they touched iron, their flesh burning with invisible fire. From that day on, every door in the region bore an iron nail, protection and confession in one. Hunger shaped the trolls' relationship to the world as much as anger did. They consumed not only flesh but essence, feeding on life force and warmth. Fires dimmed when they passed, and rivers briefly froze where they touched the water. To them, eating was communion with the chaos that spawned them. A ritual reminding both troll and victim that balance requires sacrifice. Even their kin dreaded the gluttons among them, for endless appetite brought endless pursuit from sunlight's judgment. When desperate, humans tried to appease them. Offerings of milk, bread, or slaughtered goats were left on boundary stones, marked by carved runes, pleading for peace. Sometimes it worked, and the trolls would pass without destruction, the gifts gone by morning with only deep footprints left behind. Other times, such humility insulted their pride, prompting retaliations that erased entire families. They were creatures of contradiction, predictable only in their unpredictability. Their hungers were mirrors reflecting the fears of those who told their stories. Despite their savagery, trolls could be fooled by cunning. Folk heroes rose in sagas as ordinary men and women who turned intellect into a weapon stronger than steel. They tricked trolls into looking at mirrors, thinking they faced rivals, or challenged them to tasks that delayed them until sunrise. Cunning thus became the weapon of the small against the titanic. In each tale, victory was not only survival, but proof that wit could eclipse brute strength. Yet such triumphs always felt temporary, for no story ends the hunger of the dark. Among female trolls, rage took a different form, protective, territorial, and rooted in grief. Trollkjeringer were described as both grotesque and maternal, watching over their kin with ferocity unmatched even by the males. Some raised their children within deep caverns, feeding them minerals and roots until they grew as tall as pines. Their cries were so powerful that they could shake avalanches loose, and their tears left scars in the stone like frozen rivers. When angered, they unleashed storms that carried both snow and sorrow. In one legend, a troll mother lost her infant when curious humans stole into her cave. When she returned and found the cradle empty, her howls reached the heavens. That night, hailstones the size of fists battered every field and crushed harvests for miles. Her wrath reigned until she discovered a child's toy left near a churchyard. a cruel reminder of how sanctity repelled her from her own vengeance. She vanished thereafter, her shadow said to form the outline of storms that pass over the valley each spring. Such stories blurred grief and punishment, love and rage, into the same cry against heaven. For the trolls, destruction was not always deliberate, but consequence followed them as frost follows night. Wherever they walked, harmony unraveled. The forests recovered slowly from their steps. The soil compacted by their weight took decades to heal. Their anger was an ecological act, a reminder that raw power answers intrusion without morality. Every broken roof was a sermon, every vanished traveler a verse written in fear and awe. Humanity's conquest of came at the same cost as stealing fire from gods. Under the thin moonlight, one might mistake their movement for the rolling of fog. But fog never groans with hunger. The sound of a troll feeding is described as grinding stone against bone, a rhythm of terrible patience. They ate not quickly, but reverently, as if savoring the rebellion of life before absorbing it back into the void. To watch such a sight was madness. To survive it, a kind of mourning. The memory alone drove witnesses to silence, their voices swallowed just like their stories. Some found ways to coexist with the trolls, though peace was fragile. Hermits, wise women, and hunters who respected the old ways sometimes claimed to earn their tolerance. They learned the rules of silence, never to whistle at night, never to light fires high in the hills, and never to speak their true names aloud. In return, the trolls spared their land, leaving them passages through forests others feared to tread. It was a balance of dread and reverence, one foot in mortal space and the other in myth. In this uncertain truce, the troll became more than a destroyer. It became a symbol of consequences. It represented the costs of arrogance, of taking from the earth without respect or restraint. Its fury was a reflection of patient until provoked, then absolute. The stories of their rampages, while terrifying, preserved this understanding within the hearts of those who depended on the land. They taught that mercy existed even in violence, if only one had the wisdom to hear it. The tolling of church bells, they said, drove the trolls mad with agony. Their fury turned to confusion, their strength to fear. The sound represented purity, the divine note that separated man from monster. So churches became beacons, safe islands where humanity gathered during nights of storm and rumor. When the bells rang, the mountains groaned in response, as if mourning their children. The conflict of faith and chaos echoed across valleys like two worlds shouting at one another through eternity. But even those sacred defenses did not wholly end the menace. The troll's anger evolved, becoming subtler, filtered through disappearance rather than open destruction. Crops would fail without reason, bridges would collapse under clear skies, and travelers would lose their path under stars that suddenly shifted. It was believed that such misfortunes occurred when humans forgot the old pacts or mocked the ancient faiths. The trolls were chaos given conscience. They punished arrogance with misfortune that appeared entirely natural. Through centuries of retelling, their hunger and fury transformed into moral parables. The troll ceased to be only a beast and became reflection, the embodiment of greed, wrath, or despair dormant within humanity. Those who listened understood that to mock the stories was to lose humility before the unknown. And so, the monstrous shadow carved its place within the moral architecture of the North, an eternal warning in every tale told beside a dwindling fire. When the storm howls over the fjords today, carrying broken branches and echoes through the passes, some still hear voices beneath the wind. They sound vast, slow, and mournful, neither pleading nor threatening, merely remembering. It is said those are the trolls recounting their hunger, longing again for the nights when the mountains walked. The echo of their fury remains, humming inside rocks and rivers, waiting for humanity's arrogance to awaken the cycle once more. And when it does, the silence that follows will answer every trespass humanity ever made against the wild. As dawn began to govern the northern lands, a new sound entered the wilderness: the tolling of bells. It did not belong to the wind or the animal cries that haunted the fjords. This sound was deliberate and unmoving, built from metal shaped by men and sanctified by faith. It spread across valleys like invisible fire, carrying with it something the mountains had never known before: holiness made audible. For the trolls, that sound was agony. These creatures of shadow had endured ice ages and storms without fear. Yet a single note from a church bell could drive them into madness. The vibration struck deeper than flesh, reaching the core of what bound them to the darkness. Trolls fled from it as animals flee wildfire, tearing at their ears, breaking stone with their own fists to silence the echo. To understand why the sound could tear through them, one must see what the bells represented: the triumph of a new faith over the old chaos. When Christianity reached the far north, its doctrine carried a weapon far more potent than swords or scripture: sound. The peal of church bells announced an order once foreign to this wild land. It marked the hours, divided days into discipline, and pierced the long winters with the promise of salvation. Each ring proclaimed that the world now belonged to light, and all that feared that light would retreat. Thus, the trolls found themselves hunted not by men, but by holiness itself. Villagers soon learned that bells could banish what no spear could pierce. Stories spread of trolls who tried to attack new Christian settlements, only to fall screaming when the bell tower rang. Some clawed at the ground until their fingers shattered, desperate to escape the invisible song cutting through their minds. Others turned to stone outright, their petrified faces frozen in a roar that blended rage and despair. For every sculpted monster still found beside old churches, there is a story of one slain by faith's resonance. The bell's power was more than physical harm, it was illumination. Their tones carried the divine order that trolls could not comprehend, a rhythm built upon harmony, reason, and devotion. Where their existence depended on primal chaos, the bell was perfect structure made sound. In its wake, the sacred replaced the savage, and the wilderness was tamed not by force, but by melody. That contrast marked an epical shift, the expulsion of the old gods' remnants from a land they once called their own. But the transition was not clean. The people who raised those bells were not yet free of the old fear. Many believed that each tolling invited retaliation, that somewhere beyond the forests, bruised trolls still listened, promising vengeance when faith faltered. Priests told their congregations to keep the bells ringing through the darkest hours, so that no silence would open the path for the old shadows to return. Faith needed vigilance, for silence to these people was another form of surrender to the ancient beings. The conflict between Christianity and the old world was not only holy, but personal. The trolls, after all, were not demons. That title was given later by those who desired clear division between good and evil. In the beginning, they were simply banished entities, not inherently wicked, but incompatible with the rising light. Their suffering at the bells reflected an existential truth. They belonged to a cosmos where chaos reigned and order's song was poison to their nature. The agony of sound was the agony of extinction. Some legends hinted at pity, even among the faithful. A few villagers, upon seeing a troll writhing under the bell's voice, felt sorrow for what was being lost. They described tears forming in the corners of monstrous eyes, as if the creatures understood their doom. Perhaps the trolls, in the final moments before turning to stone, grasped that they were witnessing the death of the world that birthed them. What faith called salvation, they knew as erasure. The bells tolled not only for victory, but for the burial of all that once was wild. In remote places, where Christianity arrived late, compromise still existed. The villagers prayed by day and offered appeasements by night, seeking balance rather than dominion. They would hang bells in the open air, but ring them softly, believing gentleness would spare the troll's wrath. In such borderlands, faith coexisted with superstition like ice beside flame. The people knew the church demanded obedience, yet the mountains demanded humility. Between cross and cliff, they built their fragile peace. Old women whispered that the troll's pain was not hatred, but sorrow. Each bell note reminded them of what they had once been. Giants made from divine chaos, touching stars and shaping the first landscapes. The sound dragged memory from their stone hearts, forcing them to recall a sky full of gods who no longer answered. They screamed, not at the light's cruelty, but at the loneliness it imposed. To them, eternity without darkness was exile without purpose. Across generations, these opposing forces shaped the North's identity. The trolls became emblems of the untamed past, while the bell towers symbolized mankind's emergence into ordered faith. Each mountain cast in shadow stood as a reminder of that ancient duel between silence and sound. Where the two met, myths were born. And even now, the echo of that struggle hums beneath church floors and across mist-shrouded valleys when no one listens. A trembling pulse of defiance that time cannot erase. A recurring tale tells of a great troll that lived near a newly built monastery. Night after night, it hurled stones toward the wooden chapel, splitting walls and shattering icons. The monks refused to abandon their work and rang their small bronze bell in defiance. On the seventh night, the creature crept too close, just as dawn broke. The bell rang once more, and the troll turned to stone beside the entrance, its frozen hand still clutching a rock meant for destruction. To this day, locals claim that when storm clouds gather, faint moans leak from that silent shape. The symbolism of that story goes beyond punishment. The troll, immobilized before the sacred threshold, represents the meeting point of two truths: destruction and devotion sharing a single heartbeat. The monk's faith did not simply defeat the monster, it defined it. Through their victory, the troll became holy in a strange, inverted sense. A guardian born from sin, a petrified reminder to all who entered that good and evil often wear the same scars. The line separating light from darkness is neither clear nor comfortable. In later folklore, the sound of church bells became a moral compass. Those who felt restless at its tone were said to harbor darkness in their hearts. Those who felt peace had surrendered to the divine order. The trolls, then, served as external manifestations of this internal struggle, beings who could not hide unease at truth revealed. In every ring, the world offered a choice: retreat into shadow or endure the pain that accompanies enlightenment. The trolls could not choose, and so they suffered endlessly for it. To imagine the pain they endured is to confront the depth of transformation in the human spirit during that age. Faith reshaped the natural world, silencing the voices of earth and river to glorify heaven. But somewhere, perhaps in the whisper between two tolls, another voice persisted, the echo of what the bells destroyed. It reminded listeners that every civilization builds its light upon the graves of its own myths. Even as triumph rang out, sorrow answered beneath it. The bells were more than symbols of good. They were instruments of transition. Their resonance carried the paradox of salvation and annihilation intertwined. Humanity gained dominance over the land, yet lost intimacy with its dreaming essence. The monsters did not vanish. They turned into stone and waited, monuments to a conversation unfinished. Each ringing, each tremor that rolled through the valleys marked the continuation of that dialogue between faith's purity and the wilderness's memory. There are still places in Norway and Iceland where the wind sounds deceptively like bells. It sweeps across ridges, colliding with cliffs in a symphony both haunting and holy. Travelers pause and look upward, unsure whether they hear the living faith or the dying roar of something ancient. Perhaps it is both. For the troll's agony was never truly about the bells themselves, but about the world remembering them only as relics, not as kin. When the sun sets over a northern church and its single bell tolls through the encroaching darkness, the echo carries far beyond the human ear. Mountains listen, valleys tremble, and for a brief moment, the boundary between sacred and profane blurs. In that fleeting harmony, light mourns what it conquers, and shadow acknowledges what it can never again reclaim. The pain of bells is eternal, the price paid for every dawn that rises upon the bones of the forgotten night. Long before the first troll lumbered through the forests of Scandinavia, the earth belonged to Titans. They were the Jotun, beings of colossal power and divine blood, older even than the gods who would one day claim dominion over them. The Norse called them the Ancient Ones, the primal progenitors of both chaos and creation. Where trolls were children of the mountains, the Jotun were the architects of them. Their scale was not merely physical, but cosmic, carved into the rhythm of existence itself. The sagas spoke of a time before light, when the world was nothing but mist and frost colliding in the void. Out of that nothingness came Ymir, the first Jotun, whose body was the matter from which the earth was formed. When he was slain, his flesh became soil, his bones turned to mountains, and his skull was lifted to construct the heavens. Thus, creation began not through divine order, but through divine destruction. Every troll in this way carried the echo of Ymir's fall within its blood. The Jotun were not mere monsters. They were the necessary counterpart to the gods. Where the divine sought order, they embodied primordial freedom. They represented the wild, unrestrained side of existence. The storm before the calm, the sea before boundaries. Their vastness made them both terrifying and sacred, for they existed beyond moral comprehension. In their laughter, thunder was born. In their tears, rivers flowed. To call them evil was to misunderstand their role as the raw pulse of life itself. Among their number were beings who stretched across myth and cosmos alike. Some dwelled at the edge of the known world, while others lived in realms unreachable even by the gods. Frost giants ruled Jotunheim, a land of eternal ice and blinding winds, while fire giants burned within the molten heart of Muspelheim. When the gods raised Asgard above the clouds, it was the Jotun who stood below, glaring upward, not as demons, but as defeated siblings banished from the warmth of heaven. The tension between them was not hatred alone. It was the eternal dialogue between chaos and control. From these divine titans sprang many of the traits that would later define the trolls. Their immense bodies, their elemental, and even their aversion to sunlight traced back to the primordial balance between creation and destruction. The gods feared what they could not govern, and so they pushed the Jotun to the edges of mythology, reducing their descendants to crude beasts in human lore. Each troll was therefore a fallen myth, a god diminished to mere legend by time and scripture. What was once worship became warning. The Jotun were also creatures of cunning and strange wisdom. They understood the secrets of magic, the ancient runes, and the songs that shaped the world. Many of the gods themselves learned from their elder kin, Odin among them, who sought knowledge from a Jotun sage named Mimir. This exchange of wisdom entwined the fates of gods and giants, making their rivalry more intimate than any war of mortals. Even as they fought, they mirrored each other, bound by shared ancestry and inevitable doom. In the twilight of myth, these elder giants were said to prophesy the world's end, Ragnarok, when chaos would break free and devour the order of gods. Fire giants would march from Muspelheim, frost giants would shatter the skies, and even the mountains would rise in revolt. The trolls, distant descendants of this cosmic lineage, were thought to stir restlessly whenever storms echoed through the valleys. Each rumble of thunder was a distant heartbeat of the Jotun awaiting their hour of vengeance. It is in this sense that trolls were not merely myths of wilderness, but fragments of divine narrative. They carried within them the memory of a universe that had not yet divided darkness from light. Their clumsiness, their brute strength, and their estrangement from intelligence represented a decay of that original harmony. To the ancients, the troll was not evil. It was fallen majesty, the Jotun's echo, distorted by time. Where once they shaped mountains, they now hid within them, resentful of their own descent. Some stories, however, preserved glimpses of their former glory. In one legend, a troll named Hrungnir fought Thor in a duel of cosmic proportions, his heart made of stone and his shield cut from bedrock. Though slain, Hrungnir's body became the foundation for hills that still bear his name. In another, a troll woman carried mountains in her apron, scattering them across the countryside when surprised by dawn. These tales do not mock their strength, they honor it, veiling reverence behind fear. Among these ancient lineages, not all Jotun were monstrous. Some were described as beautiful beyond words, their forms radiant with the energy of stars. The goddess Skadi, born of giant blood, became one of the most revered figures among both divine and mortal worlds. She embodied the contradictions of her kin, fierce yet noble, wild yet wise. Through her, the myth reminds us that even within chaos lies grace, and that divinity and monstrosity may share the same lineage. She was the bridge between the mountain and the throne. The term Jotunborn, used in ancient speech, meant those born of the giants. It referred to creatures, or sometimes people, who carried the blood of the elder titans. Some believe that certain humans possessed traces of that lineage, their uncanny strength or strange endurance marking them as remnants of the old world. Such individuals were both feared and respected, seen as bridges between mortal fragility and the forgotten might of the cosmos. In their veins slept entire epics of thunder. Over time, the myths of the Jotun fractured and scattered like ice breaking across a thaw. As Christianity spread, giants became villains, stripped of their sacred complexity. They were no longer co-creators of the world, but symbols of rebellion and sin. The trolls inherited this diminished legacy, surviving as deformed echoes of a vanished theology. In that transformation lies a melancholy truth. The fall of the Jotun was not a defeat of evil, but the silencing of his voice within myth. When order conquers, mystery dies with it. Yet myths have memory, and memory often resists burial. Wind that howls through fjords still carries hints of the giants' voices, fragmented and vast. Certain cliffs resemble faces turned skyward, as if the Jotun themselves were frozen mid-defiance. The trolls that dwell beneath those ridges may, in their dull eyes, hold faint vestiges of divine awareness, a sorrowful knowledge that they descend from gods whose stories were rewritten. To look into such eyes is to glimpse eternity's reflection, dulled but not extinguished. The gods feared the Jotun for more than their might, they feared their truth. The giants understood that creation requires destruction, that light only shines because shadow exists to define it. This wisdom made them dangerous, for it challenged the moral order established by divine authority. Their exile, therefore, was inevitable. Yet their essence persisted, woven into rock, tree, and storm, reminding all who listen that order itself is built on what it denies. To the people of the North, mountains and glaciers remained living symbols of these elder beings. They stood as monuments to divine struggle, remnants of a time when the boundary between myth and matter had not yet hardened. When travelers heard distant avalanches or saw the aurora blaze across winter skies, they said the Jotun were stirring, restless in their slumber beneath the crust of the world. Each eruption of volcano or quake of ice was their forgotten language spoken once more. The trolls, diminished descendants of this cosmic race, are thus fragments of a fallen cosmos. Their laughter is thunder remembered as mockery, their strength a broken echo of the forces that once sculpted creation. They are degraded gods made monstrous, punished not by evil deeds, but by time's erosion. When they hurl stones or shatter trees, they act out memories older than thought, rehearsing a war that ended before mankind began. Their rage is not hatred, but nostalgia for eternity. Even today, when replaces saga and reason replaces right, the spirit of the Jotun-born endures. Mountains continue to loom with impossible dignity, reminding those who look upon them of powers beyond measure or mercy. To whisper their name is to awaken something in the blood, a tremor of awe that reason cannot explain. The myth lives on, not as superstition, but as reverence for the unknowable, an acknowledgement that humanity, for all its light, still exists in the shadow of giants. And so, the story of the troll is not separate from that of the Jotun. It is its continuation. The elder giants have not vanished, but have merely changed form, dissolving into rock, snow, and silence. Somewhere beneath the northern stars, their hearts still beat in unison with the shifting earth. The Jotun-born are all around and within us, reminders that creation's first breath has never truly stopped. It hums beneath every mountain and behind every storm, waiting for the day when chaos, weary of exile, will rise again to reclaim its throne. In the north, the earth remembers every story ever told about the trolls. Its valleys whisper their names, and its peaks stand as monuments to their downfall. To travel across Norway or Sweden is to walk through a museum sculpted by and myth alike, where every strange rock formation carries a tale. The people of those lands did not see coincidence in the shapes of their mountains. They saw confession. the frozen testimony of creatures turned to stone at the break of dawn. In every ridge and pillar of granite, a legend lies dormant. One of the most striking of these monuments is Trolltunga, the tongue of the troll. This sacred ledge juts from a mountain above a vast glacial lake, as if a colossal creature had once leaned out to challenge the sun before being petrified mid-roar. The locals say it was the last troll of that region, defiant even in defeat. When travelers stand upon that edge today, they do not merely behold a wonder of geology, but gaze upon a soul captured in rock. The entire landscape becomes scripture, written in the alphabet of storms and silence. Another site, Trollveggen, the troll wall, rises like the spine of a resting titan. Its towering face looms above the valley of Romsdalen, shadowed by clouds that seem afraid to touch it. Old tales speak of a great council of trolls who gathered there to conspire against mankind, plotting vengeance during the longest winter night. When dawn arrived unexpectedly early, the mountains swallowed their gathering whole. Their petrified bodies became the jagged cliffs that now challenge climbers and invite reverence from those who understand what they truly were: the last stand of the old world. Scattered across Scandinavia's landscapes are countless other remnants. Boulders the size of houses lie in peculiar clusters far from any mountain, attributed to trolls who hurled them during nocturnal battles. Some stand in lines that stretch across valleys, marking ancient paths of retreat as the sun rose on their doomed flight. To the observer, they may be mere geological coincidence. But to those who inherited the tales, each one is a memory made solid. The land itself bears guilt, remembering both the power and the punishment of its giants. Place names carry this remembrance as well. Across Norway and Iceland, villages and peaks bear titles that translate to troll forests, troll bridges, or troll hills. These names were not given out of whimsy, but reverence, an acknowledgement that the story of humanity is inseparable from the story of these beings. By naming the world after them, people ensured the trolls' survival in language even after their bodies turned to stone. Words, like mountains, resist erosion when spoken enough times through the centuries. In the western fjords, fishermen once told that the shapes of certain coastal rocks revealed the fates of trolls who wandered too close to the shore. They stood forever, staring toward the horizon, longing to see the ocean one last time before fate claimed them. During twilight, when waves crash along the dark water, some claim the spray glitters faintly on those stony figures, as if salt tears continue to fall from petrified eyes. In that reflection, grief and reverence mingle like sea foam and night. The people of the North believed itself conspired to preserve these lessons. Whenever unusual rock pillars collapsed or cracked, legends were born anew, claiming a troll's final resistance against the eroding hand of time. The breaking of stone was not merely geological. It was thought to be the slow death of memory, a troll finally crumbling into dust after centuries of silence. In this sense, the natural world became both the body and the tomb of myth. Every shift of soil or rush of river water transformed forgotten legends into motion once more. In some regions, the stories became intricately tied to moral instruction. A boulder left in an open field might remind villagers of greed punished by divine light, or of a troll who boasted too loudly of strength greater than the sun's. Families told their children of the rocks near their farms, warning them never to lie, never to challenge morning, and never to laugh at the wind. The landscape itself preached to them, silent but ever present. In this way, stone replaced scripture for those too far from churches. Certain formations bear the marks of individuality. In the northeast, there stands what locals call the Troll Bride, a column of stone shaped like a kneeling figure veiled by cascading snow. According to tradition, she was a female troll who fell in love with a human shepherd. She begged the gods to let her see him during the day, forgetting the sun's curse. Her wish was granted, and at the first light of dawn, she froze forever, facing the valley where her lover once lived. Each winter, snow cloaks her once more like a bridal gown renewed by. There are also playful legends amid the solemnity. The troll fingers, 5 thin peaks rising from the coastal ridges, are said to be the hand of a troll grasping the sky after losing his footing while escaping daylight. Travelers look upon them and laugh, yet even the laughter carries awe. For within its humor lies acknowledgement that the battle between human frailty and divine wildness never truly ended. The troll fingers reach still, and humanity continues to walk beneath them, pretending mastery over a world that once breathed with giants. In olden times, people treated such sightings with a curious blend of superstition and gratitude. Farmers left bread or milk at the bases of sacred stones, fearing storms if they neglected the ancient guardians embodied there. Even the rising Christian faith could not erase these gestures of appeasement. Priests would scold, but the people persisted, believing that respecting the petrified trolls maintained harmony between man and the sleeping wilderness. Sacred offerings turned into traditions, which turned into heritage, quietly surviving under the eye of the church. When travelers from foreign lands arrived and marveled at the strange shapes of stone, the locals told them the stories not as entertainment, but as genealogy. To them, stone was ancestry. Their ancestors were intertwined with these creatures, for humans and trolls came from the same soil and perished under the same sky. In narrating these myths, they reaffirmed identity. Each word carried pride, suggesting that the North was not barren, but inhabited by living memory, its mythology etched into every ridge. Through time, these geological monuments shaped national consciousness. The concept of being born among giants gave northern cultures a sense of enduring resilience. Mountains had witnessed everything. Faith replaced faith. Empires fell, seas changed color. But the petrified trolls remained, indifferent and eternal. They became emblems of survival through transformation, of how destruction can also mean preservation. By embracing the legend of the trolls, the people inherited the endurance of stone itself. Even today, those who hike Norway's peaks or cross Iceland's lava fields encounter these silent shapes, standing as they have stood for countless generations. To some, they are only natural wonders. To others, they are reminders of the stories that kept their ancestors alive through the terror of winter nights. A hiker touching the cold surface of rock may feel the faint hum of something older than geology, a resonance between flesh and earth. In that moment, distance collapses between the living and the petrified. The persistence of these names and shapes reveals a deeper truth about memory. Myths do not die. They convert. Where books burn or languages change, mountains remain, carrying the remnants of forgotten speech. Trolls may no longer walk, but they continue to influence the dreams of every child who sees faces in cliffs or hears rumbling when storms circle the peaks. The landscape itself becomes teacher and oracle, whispering the same lesson told by countless winters, that what we call silence is only memory speaking more slowly. There are parts of Scandinavia where locals swear that certain rocks hum just before snowfall. Scientists attribute it to wind patterns, yet folklore claims it is the trolls breathing in unison before the long seasonal sleep. These tales blur the divide between truth and reverence. reminding believers and skeptics alike that myth has always been the language through which humans interpret the unknowable. The hum becomes a heartbeat connecting centuries, evidence that the old guardians have never entirely left. When viewed from a distant ridge at dusk, the mountains ripple like frozen waves, each crest carrying a name as old as the language of thunder. To look upon them is to see time made visible, stacked layer upon layer in both stone and story. These are not mere formations. They are conversations between gods, men, and the monsters that link them. The trolls, caught forever in that moment between sin and survival, endure as witnesses to a truth beyond decay. Stone forgets nothing, and legend never stops repeating. In this frozen communion between rock and reverence, the North teaches its most enduring wisdom. What was once feared becomes sacred. What was once conquered becomes guardian. The trolls that once hurled stones now sustain the hills upon which villages thrive. Humanity's victory over them was never absolute. It was an inheritance. To live among these lands is to walk daily through a quiet pantheon carved by sunlight and sorrow. And if one listens carefully, the wind between the cliffs will speak their ancient names again, low and patient, echoing through both stone and soul. In the dim light of twilight, the final story of the trolls does not end in defeat, but in transformation. They no longer wander the forests or hurl stones into distant valleys, yet their presence persists, woven into the very identity of the North. Every whisper of wind against the cliffs, every echo in the mountain caves carries the shape of their memory. They remain the pulse beneath the surface, quiet but eternal. Where the human world sees myth, the earth still feels their heartbeat. The modern world, with all its light and noise, has not erased them. It has only changed the color of their shadow. In the tales of scholars and artists, in the designs of fantasy and literature, the trolls reinvent themselves, refusing to decay into silence. They move from mountains into minds, transferring their weight from stone to imagination. The essence that once terrified shepherds now inspires storytellers, proving that legends never die, they adapt. Their immortality is no longer carved in rock, but in reverence. When John Ronald Reuel Tolkien dreamed of his creatures of Middle-earth, he reached back into this dark Nordic soil. His trolls, massive and dim-witted, were children of these ancient Nordic phantoms, descendants of their cruelty, humor, and tragic fragility. Yet in giving them speech, in granting them a kind of humanity, he sparked their rebirth for the modern age. For the first time in centuries, the troll rose again from the mountain, not as a threat, but as a muse. Art, it seems, has become their new sunlight. Beyond Tolkien, their image burns quietly through Scandinavian folklore, art, cinema, and literature. In stories of recent decades, they are no longer merely beasts to be feared, but reflections of wildness vanishing from a civilized world. Filmmakers depict them roaming misty valleys in hidden reserves, forgotten gods too old to understand the modern age. Pain and nostalgia replace horror, turning them into symbols of endurance against extinction. They are the voices of mountains mourning their erosion, the giants who remember when humanity still listened. In modern myths, the troll serves as mirror. It reflects our violence toward the earth, our arrogance in believing ourselves separate from wilderness. Each tale retold is a confession. We have driven our giants into legend and now worship their absence in art and story. When the forests shrink, we call their silence progress. When mountains groan under dynamite and steel, the trolls are said to stir underneath, shifting restlessly in their ancient sleep. Their anger remains, not as vengeance, but as reminder. For the people who still live close to, the faith in trolls lingers not as belief, but as reverence. Farmers speak softly near strange stones. Children warn each other not to whistle at night on the ridges. These gestures are psychological offerings, proof that ancient respect cannot fully vanish. The troll has evolved from creature into concept, a manifestation of humility before forces larger than humanity. In that transformation lies both survival and grace. The Christian bells that once banished them no longer ring with terror, yet their tone carries the memory of that battle. In every church standing beneath steep ridges, sunlight still paints the silhouettes of the trolls it defeated. The faithful pray within those walls, and the mountains answer with silence. But beyond that silence lives coexistence, the peace of opposites, learning to breathe side by side. The divine and the wild no longer duel. They simply endure together. There is, however, an irony in victory. Light may have conquered darkness, but humanity's triumph over mystery left its own shadows behind. In turning the wilderness into metaphor, the world severed itself from the raw awe that once defined it. The trolls were never mere monsters. They were emotions given shape. The fear, wonder, and reverence that balanced human life against the vastness of creation. To lose them is to lose imagination itself. Without monsters, the sacred landscape falls silent. Across the northern countries, the legend remains alive in subtle ways. A traveler might find roadside carvings of troll faces smiling from mossy stone, or souvenirs celebrating the old giants in childish form. Children grow up believing in friendly trolls with bulbous noses and wide grins, guardians of forests rather than destroyers. It is an adaptation not of distortion, but of tenderness, a collective need to soften what once terrified. Even innocence knows that forgetting breeds emptiness. But beneath this playful version, the original myth still breathes, heavy and patient. Writers and historians occasionally awaken it through darker retellings, restoring the grandeur of the old tales. In these, the trolls return to their ancient dignity, creatures not of malice, but of inevitability. Bound by laws the world has outgrown, they feed on more than flesh. They consume arrogance. Their gaze returns us to a time when light and darkness were still equals. When the veil between the two thinned, meaning was born. In the scientific world, the fascination continues in quieter tones. Geologists study the formations that gave rise to the earliest troll legends, tracing how earthquakes, landslides, and glacial erosion produced their colossal shapes. Yet even those who study rocks admit there is beauty in the story attached to them. Myth, they realize, speaks a different truth. A truth of emotion rather than fact. A landscape without myth is merely land. With stories, it becomes a soul. The trolls, then, are not fossils, but foundations. The endurance of the trolls is proof of humanity's need to remember what it fears. Every culture creates its own giants, and every age redefines them. The Nordics carved theirs from frost and despair, but each generation sculpts them anew from its own anxieties. Today, in a world of concrete and glass, the trolls no longer inhabit the hills. They live in the spaces where technology meets wilderness, where human ambition eclipses humility. They remind us that the more we silence, the louder our myths will roar in return. To the storyteller, the troll remains sacred material. Each retelling is a ritual, each description an act of reverence for mystery itself. When a voice speaks of them, whether around a fire or into a microphone, it reenacts the ancient pact between human curiosity and the unknown. The listener becomes a traveler crossing boundaries unseen, walking the same haunted terrain once feared by ancestors under winter skies. Every word revives the smell of stone, the echo of distant footsteps, the murmur that says, "Beware and remember." Their endurance also reveals something about humanity's strange compassion for the monstrous. We preserve in stories what we could not live beside in life. The troll, now rendered harmless through time, has become a way of forgiving the wilderness we once tried to destroy. When we draw their images, when we name our mountains after them, we participate in reconciliation. The creature that once embodied chaos now humbles us with its silence, reminding us that light, too, must respect the shadows it conquers. The old folklore ends where it began, in the meeting of worlds. The dawn still petrifies them, but only in legend. In truth, the trolls outlast the sun by waiting behind it. Each sunset revives them, every twilight reopening the ancient window between reality and memory. Those who walk alone through the fjords at dusk still feel the weight of unseen eyes, the same uneasy awareness that birthed these stories in the first place. The North, for all its modernity, remains a land of thresholds. Even in the digital age, the yearning for these stories persists. Artists recreate them in virtual mountains or sculpt them from pixels with reverent precision. Storytellers adapt their myths for new audiences, translating dread into beauty. Yet no matter how forms evolve, their core remains unchanged, a reminder that truth lies not in facts, but in faith. The trolls endure because they embody what cannot be proven, but must still be believed. Their survival is the victory of wonder over certainty. At night, when the aurora spreads across the northern skies, the light seems to mimic the shape of an enormous spirit rising above the mountains. Some say it is the soul of the last troll illuminated by the memory of creation. Others call it the laughter of those who were turned to stone. Perhaps both are right. The aurora dances as a bridge between and myth, between explanation and awe. The trolls, transformed into motion and color, reach once again toward the heavens that abandoned them. And so, the tale closes not with the death of monsters, but with their translation into memory. The trolls remain, not in fear but in reverence, etched into every summit and story told by the fire. They are the poetry that binds the natural to the divine, the echo of a voice older than speech. Humanity may have caged the wild with faith and reason, but the shadow still endures, patient, watchful, and waiting for the moment curiosity outshines comfort. In that moment, the giants will wake again, not in wrath, but in remembrance.